by somebody. Anyway, there are people, those same forces that have been at work throughout the history of the country that have created, crafted, and supported these restrictive and basically racist laws are still around. They're still here, and they're still saying the same old stuff, the same old nonsensical stuff, really. I mean, this one quote really stuck out to me. It was Sessions. Where is it? Okay, Sessions quote. This is a quote. "I don't think anybody has articulated as effectively the impact that this lawlessness is having on wages and security of people." So, according to him, the influx of undocumented people coming here and not going through the proper channels, has had an impact on wages and security. And he's speaking about Trump's articulating that. Trump is the one who was saying things like, Mexico is not sending its best. It's sending drug dealers and thieves and rapists and so on. So this is, according to Sessions, the articulation of that lie, basically, was an effective articulation of the impact that current immigration is having on people in this country. It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm not articulating this myself very well. I had a long day. Okay. So anyway, that's Trump. And I think, where did it go? Oh, here we go. So now you notice in the last article I was talking about how Numbers USA was commenting on how they didn't have a position on the whole, as they put it, the whole Muslim thing, which is another big part of what Trump is pushing for and part of his appeal to his constituency. So I thought I would read this bit here. This is from TPM DC. It's entitled, "Never Been a Time Like This. Alarmed Muslim Voters Mobilized to Stop Trump." Friday prayer service was winding down at a mosque in Northern Virginia when the group's president made his way to the front of the room and made an announcement he typically reserves for the final weeks before Election Day. "The beauty of this country is that we have a voice," Ishan Islam began as he looked out onto a room so crowded for Juma that some of the men were on a tarp outside. "We live in a state that is a swing state, that is a very important state, and all the candidates are going to be fighting over this. We can decide the outcome," he told congregants at the Dar al-Nur Islamic Community Center in suburban Washington, D.C. This cycle, with Republican nominee Donald Trump proposing a ban on Muslims entering the country and threatening to shut down mosques, Muslim Americans are urgently aware that they need to mobilize against him. "There has never been a time like this with so much tension," Islam told TPM in an interview. Since announcing his candidacy, Trump has shown a pattern of ostracizing minority groups, calling undocumented immigrants criminals and rapists when he declared his candidacy. Trump's demagoguery against Muslim Americans, however, his conflation of religious Muslims with radical Islamists at a time when the country appears to be more alarmed by terrorism than at any point since 9/11, has been especially divisive and is now leading American Muslims to take action. According to Pew Research Center, there are 3.3 million Muslims living in the United States, just 1% of the total population. But voter registration drives by groups like the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, Islamic Circle of North America, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and the Arab American Institute are already underway as groups set out to register 1 million new voters this year. There is a real sense that this particular election cycle has really targeted our community, said Maya Berry, the executive director of the Arab American Institute, which works to mobilize Arab Americans, including but not limited to Muslim Americans. The response has certainly been that we need to get more organized. Berry said that this cycle she will deploy field workers in 5 different states, Michigan, Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and California, to work on mobilization. I didn't have that in 2012, Berry said. There is definitely a sense of urgency that this particular election is important. Data on Muslim American voters is scarce. Their voting patterns have been hardly been studied, and it may be too early to know exactly how Trump's rhetoric is spurring action. But according to CARE, which keeps its own private voter database on individuals with traditionally Muslim names, more than 300,000 new Muslim voters have registered to cast ballots since the 2012 presidential election. Linda Sarsour, a community organizer and executive director of the Arab American Association of New York, said her job is also getting easier this cycle as more Muslim voters are getting involved. I have been an organizer for 15 years. I remember 15 years ago it was like pulling teeth, she said, of trying to convince mosques to allow voter registration on their property. Now it's like they're asking us to come. For Muslim Americans, Trump's screeds are alarming, but his popularity, the fact that millions of Americans are supporting him, is an additional catalyst for action. It's even more frightening that a majority of our society goes with him. They believe in him and they agree with him, and it's okay for them to accept what he's saying, said Lamaya Awad, a 23-year-old from Fredericksburg, Virginia, who had come to Friday's service at Dar al-Nur. People have become more brave about portraying their racism. The Bridge Initiative, a research project based at Georgetown University that studies Islamophobia, estimated that in 2015, a year that saw the escalation of the Republican primary, the San Bernardino and Paris terrorist attacks, and a worldwide refugee crisis, there were 174 reported incidents of hate crimes against Muslims in the United States, 12 murders, 8 arsons, 29 physical assaults, 50 threats, 54 acts of vandalism, and 9 shootings or bombings. Over the last year, a woman threw hot coffee on a group of Muslims praying in a park. In another incident, someone shot at the car of a woman leaving a mosque in Tampa. In March, the Washington Post reported a Trump supporter allegedly beat a 23-year-old Muslim senior at Wichita State University as he screamed, "Trump will take our country from you guys." We kind of lose our trust in each other as a neighbor, as a friend, said Shaheen Parveen, a 41-year-old attendee at the Virginia mosque who was registered to vote. I think, what if Trump is the person who opened the real face of America? Shadi Hamid, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, said Muslim Americans began mobilizing earlier this year, not just because of Trump. Let's not delude ourselves into thinking this is just about Trump. The Republican Party has a Muslim problem, Hamid said. This cycle, Republican candidate Ben Carson said on Meet the Press that the country shouldn't elect a Muslim American president. Senator Ted Cruz sought foreign policy advice from well-known anti-Muslim conspiracy theorist Frank Gaffney. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush announced on the campaign trail that he would prioritize Christian Syrian refugees above Muslims. It is a far cry from the party's approach in the 2000 election, when George W. Bush actually sought to make inroads with the Muslim community, and as CARE has estimated, as many as 70% of American Muslims voted for him. This is really an unprecedented moment for the American Muslim community, Hamid said. There was fear after 9/11, but this is really at a different level. The rise of Trump has made us realize that our place in America's society is more tenuous than we may have expected. But mobilization against Trump and numbers that show 70% of American Muslims identify as Democrats do not necessarily translate into enthusiasm for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Clinton's hawkish foreign policy, interventionist strategy in Libya, her Iraq war vote, and strong support for Israel all give some younger Muslim Americans pause. I am very dissatisfied with our choices, said 20-year-old Anissa Johnson, who had supported Sanders in the primary. I'd like to not vote, but I think that would be irresponsible. The Clinton campaign pointed to her Muslim outreach efforts in Minnesota, California, and New York, and said it has been doing its own targeted outreach to Muslim leaders. Sarsour, the community activist in New York, who is a Sanders supporter, said that one of her messages to Muslim American voters this year has been to not be one-issue voters, and she says the community has been much more engaged. I will be honest with you, we have been an apathetic community, Sarsour said, noting that many Muslim Americans tell her they rarely see candidates who fully represent American Muslim values. My messaging is anti-Trump. That is where I feel more people are willing to participate. It has been a whole campaign about us, without us, Sarsour said. So you get a sense of where this is going. I mean, you can picture reading in the history books about this campaign. It's really fascinating, and you get a sense of I don't know. I'm not even sure how to put it, but just you're getting a sense of what things are shaping up to be like. Here, like what the forces, the various forces are gathering around, coalescing around certain things. So, and this is what tends to happen in these campaigns. Since since we have two basic parties, and so there are only two people running that really, I mean, there's a Green candidate, there are other candidates, but there's only two people who have a chance of winning, basically. So people start to coalesce around certain candidates that are closer or the closest to their particular point of view. And so you see a lot of sort of uncomfortable relationships forming as people sort of slowly kind of cozy up with a candidate who's like, they're not really happy to start with, but over time they grow closer as the other candidate becomes farther away. And you see this happening here, and it's interesting because I don't know, but I don't really understand what Trump thinks he's doing. It's like he seems to be finding a way to offend absolutely everybody except his core constituency. So usually you see the candidates kind of drifting to the middle and trying to be, spread their arms as wide as possible to get as many people on board. Like, yes, even though you're kind of way over here, you're still more on this side than that side, so vote for me. But Trump, for some reason, just seems to be going as far off to one side as he possibly can, and I can't even imagine how he thinks he could win anything by doing that. Okay. Well, I don't know. That's a question without an answer. So, I don't know if this is. Well, I'll try reading this. This is actually a transcript of a conversation. So it may be a little awkward to read, but I'll go ahead and try it because I think it's got some interesting content, and it's certainly relevant. So, excuse me, I'm very hoarse today. The title of this is "What's Next in the Political Fight Over Immigration." This is from NPR. So the Supreme Court left in place a decision to block the president's immigration plan. Mark Krikorian of the Center for Immigration Studies and Ali Nourani of the National Immigration Forum respond. So this is Ray Suarez, the host. We want to spend a few minutes looking at a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision that may change the futures of more than 4 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. Back on June 22nd, the United States Supreme Court deadlocked 4-4, leaving in place a lower court decision to block President Obama's order temporarily protecting some undocumented parents and family members of American citizens from deportation while giving them access to work permits under a work program called the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residents, or DAPA. During a time of heated debate and immigration policy playing a big role in the presidential election, what does this ruling change for people who might face deportation? Joining us now to talk about more of this here in Washington is Mark Krikorian, who runs the Center for Immigration Studies, which calls for tighter restrictions on immigration, and Ali Noorani. He runs the National Immigration Forum, which advocates for immigrant rights. Noorani joins us from Chicago member station WBEZ. Great to have you both. First, even though it's been more than a week, let's start with getting both your reactions to the Supreme Court ruling. And this is Mark Krikorian. Well, the ruling actually doesn't change anything, so that the illegal immigrants who would have benefited, nobody's really sure, but maybe 3 or 4 million people who have U.S.-born kids are already explicitly exempted from deportation by the president's other policies. And what this program, which is blocked, would have done, would have given them work permits, Social Security numbers, EITC welfare, driver's licenses at the state level. So it wouldn't have been a provision of an actual benefit so that they don't get the benefit, but they don't actually change in their current status. And it's important to note that the Supreme Court didn't rule, and neither did really the lower court, on the substance of the program. In other words, whether the president is allowed to do this under the Constitution. All they did say was that the hold on the program, the injunction that froze it, has to stay in place until there's a full litigation, a full airing of the issues at the lower court level. And now we have Ali Noorani. Well, from our perspective, this decision and really keeping this injunction in place is a real travesty from a law enforcement perspective and from an economic perspective. Chiefs and sheriffs across the country will have to continue to stretch valuable law enforcement resources to pull over, detain undocumented immigrants who they happen to run across, and for very, very minor reasons. And as a result, those police officers are going to be taking their time and resources away from really pursuing the people who are here to do us harm. And then from an economic perspective, employers across the country were looking to this particular program to finally stabilize their workforce so that employers and employees alike are all competing for the same job at the same wage. So yes, Mark is correct. The status quo continues, which means that our valuable law enforcement resources are stretched thin and unscrupulous employers continue to benefit from a broken immigration system. And then we have Ray Suarez speaking again. Ali Noorani, from the beginning, everyone understood that this action or series of actions had an end date. That is, it sunsetted with the end of Obama administration, as this effectively moved into the inbox of the next president of the United States. And Noorani replies, I don't think he actually cleared his throat there, but that's just me. I think this issue, if it wasn't already driving the November election, it is certainly above the fold now. I think that the program, yes, has been deferred to the next administration, but what is happening now is that Latino, Asian, and their allied voters are all looking to the candidates and asking them the question of, okay, where are you on immigration policy, and how are you going to fix this system? Mark Krikorian speaks. Yeah, I mean, Ali is basically right that now it's a political question, which frankly is where it should have been all along. I mean, the president basically asserted that he had the unilateral authority to legalize these people, because that's really what it is. It's not a full, well, they don't get green cards. Under the program, they would not have gotten green cards, but they would have gotten basically what amounts to green card light, or a diet green card, if you will. And it's not really temporary. It's only temporary on paper. Once you legalize 3 or 4 million people and give them work permits and Social Security numbers and all the rest of it, that's not really something you can undo. And that's what the lower court said, that this is the kind of thing that if it's found to be unconstitutional or illegal for some other reason, the president's action is illegal, it's very difficult to undo it, and therefore they shouldn't go forward with it until those questions are decided. Ray Suarez speaks. Mark Krikorian, going ahead. Just as we have 7 months left in the Obama administration, we've got about 4 or 5 months left in the election season. Does this clarify this issue going ahead for both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? Krikorian. Yeah, I think it clearly does clarify it, because long before the Supreme Court gets another bite at the apple of this case, the election, as he suggests, is going to some degree, shape the outcome. So first of all, if Donald Trump is elected, then he'll simply cancel the memos and there won't be any program. If Hillary Clinton is elected, she has already promised to extend this kind of unilateral amnesty without Congress's permission to reach basically all illegal immigrants. So in a sense, I mean, this really does raise the stakes within the immigration context of this election. Ali Noorani. I think that the outcome of this election will completely shape the outcome of immigration policy. I think that the choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton could not be more clear. And I think that if Hillary Clinton wins, you will see a tidal wave of support and, frankly, pressure on Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to move forward with a solution. And if Donald Trump wins, you're going to see the mass deportation of 11 million people. And he said it, the development and the deployment of a deportation force. In politics, clear choices are good. You just have to pick a side. And Suarez wraps up, says, that's Ali Noorani. He runs the National Immigration Forum, which advocates for immigrant rights. He joined us from Chicago member station WBEZ. And here with me in Washington, Mark Krikorian, who runs the Center for Immigration Studies, which calls for tighter restriction on immigration. Thanks a lot, gents. So that was, I think, a pretty well-balanced and sort of clearly laid out scenario of what the Supreme Court's decision did and didn't do. It didn't change anything, and that was kind of the point. It left everything stuck up in the air, which is where it's been for a while now. I mean, since comprehensive immigration was proposed, and then the House refused to even hold a vote on it, everything's been sort of on hold. And you have the various sides saying what they want, saying what they need, saying why it's important, excuse me, to have those things. Gosh, I can't talk here. My throat is killing me. Excuse me. All right. So yeah, the various sides saying why they think their point of view is important and what needs to be done, and rather than working towards a common goal, like saying, okay, we need a solution, so let's pull your side in and our side in and kind of come together towards this middle ground. What has instead been happening, because of the intransigence of the House Republicans, the two sides have been going in opposite directions. And so what is going to happen here with this next election is we will be farther apart than we started 4 years ago. When comprehensive immigration reform was proposed, there were differences on what should be done, what the end result should be, but it was more tinkering around the edges of how we could arrive at this sort of this general situation where we were dealing with the new people coming in, stopping them in one case, or sort of normalizing the process, making it more flexible and navigatable, if I can pretend that's a word, on the other side. And instead of finding a way to kind of balance both those things and do both those things, which honestly, that's what comprehensive immigration reform that came out of the Senate, that's what it was. It was a middle ground between these two sides. What happened was there was a strong enough group in the House of Representatives that didn't want any of it, that thought all of it was wrong and bad and should go away, and immigrants should just be killed on sight or whatever. I mean, there were actually people saying that, we should have armed drones and shooting people trying to cross the border, all sorts of things like that. I mean, that was how extreme the thinking was with that group. And so they refused to even look at comprehensive immigration reform because they didn't want any of that. They only wanted a policy where nobody comes in, everybody that's here who's not properly documented has to go. I mean, they basically, Donald Trump immigration policy is the face, is the identity of what those people wanted. Those people blew up the process and refused to cooperate or refused to do anything about it. And because of that, we now have an entire candidate. An entire candidate, that's a funny way of putting it, but we have a candidate whose entire immigration platform is basically no, 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 and no. No more immigration. No fixing anything. No letting people stay. No, no, no. And so I'm not sure where we start after this next election. I'm guessing that what has to happen is one side or the other has to lose so definitively, so completely, that it becomes clear to everybody else that, all right, this point of view is not going to work. People aren't going to go for it. Nobody's going to accept this. It's just, some people want it, but not enough people. Everybody else wants something else. There's a mandate for this thing, whatever it is, this point of view, whichever one prevails, and the other one loses. I think then you could get some traction from one side or the other. So let's say Trump wins a resounding victory, a landslide election. Okay, clearly that means that the majority of Americans don't want any more immigrants coming in. They want everybody that's here to go away. That's it, just a wall. They want the wall. I think if Hillary wins in a landslide election, then it becomes clear. I don't know that you can overcome that anti-immigrant sentiment that easily, but it will become clear enough to the majority of lawmakers anyway that the American people would like a more flexible, more open immigration system. They want us to fix it. They want us to deal with this problem. They want to move forward. And I think, I hope, I'm planning, I'm working towards something along those lines. So yeah, that's my hope. And the results will be, and that will be enough to sort of force the system to start working again, to force lawmakers to confront the fact that they need to work together to do something. I don't know. I mean, we had 8 years, 2 elections where Obama won, and we still had 8 years of Republicans saying, no, we're not going to work with you. No, we're not going to do anything you want to do. No, 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 and no. So, I mean, it's possible that that's just going to continue. I'd hate to think so, but it is possible that they'll continue with that thing. It's worked for them so far, more or less, but, I don't know. It's hard to predict. It's really hard to predict. It has worked to an extent, but the party is now, because of Trump, is so fractured and so factionalized that I don't know that they can do anything like that anymore. I don't know that they can even get together